Chinese leaders have set a target for economic growth this year at around 7%. That is half a percentage point lower than last year's target. They're calling this the new normal pace of growth. The annual National People's Congress began Thursday in Beijing. Premier Li Keqiang gave the keynote address. Last year, leaders set a growth target rate of around 7.5%. The economy ended up growing 7.4%. It was the slowest rate of expansion in 24 years, but officials admitted even that was not easy to achieve. So how are they planning to steer the world's second largest economy this year? I spoke with a strategist at CMB International Securities in Hong Kong. Daniel So says leaders are looking for flexibility as they try to change things around.
Lowering the target is a sensible move because last year China already struggled to meet the 7.5% target. It's better to tuning it down to give way to structural reforms. That's the officials are willing to lower the target, shows that the pace of growth is not as big as a priority as in the past. The quality of growth is also equally important. And in the past decade, China, being the world's factory, did bring great economic growth, but also left serious problems, most notably pollution. That growth model is not sustainable, so reform is a must, but reform inevitably would bring short-term pain. The wording around 7% will give the government more flexibility in these policies. I believe the real bottom line is 6.8%.
Now, speaking of reforms, Li said that he will continue to carry out structural reforms. What are you expecting there?
I expect, firstly, fixed asset investments, FAI, would play a smaller role in GDP growth. And on the other hand, domestic consumption would take the driver's seat. There are two key tasks for the governments here. The first one is making people able to spend, and the second is make them willing to spend. To make them able to spend would need to keep the unemployment rate low by supporting small enterprises with providing them with cheap and easy funding. The solutions could be internet banking, internet finance, and privately owned banks to give them easy finance. Then the second, to make them willing to spend, is to provide more social welfare.
I see. And what about price trends? Leaders are hoping the consumer price index this year will come in at around 3%, but last year CPI only rose 2%, and that came in well below their target then of around 3.5%. And in addition, producer prices have been falling for almost 3 years. How big of a concern is deflation?
A producer price index, PPI, would keep falling this year, dragged by a slump in oil prices and also the everlasting overcapacities in certain industries. But that is not really a bad thing for China because it is a net oil importer and consumers may actually benefit from falling prices. As for CPI consumer prices, I don't think the deflation risk is very high because wages in China is still growing rapidly, unlike in Japan or in Europe where wages still stagnate. The biggest deflation risk would come from the housing market. If a collapse in the house price happened, that would be a catastrophe. The government would need to engineer a soft landing by lowering the mortgage rate or relaxing purchase restriction if necessary.